Okay.
What stands out for me is it's an assertion of identity, which helps, can be really helpful with mental health, especially as we know, and we're seeing that there's a lot of rise in our youth, especially with problems related to appearance and identity. So this can be really empowering for many, where it frees them from the shackles of society and societal's expectations.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
That's true. When I am working with the clients, and when we started the first session, and usually it's on the Zoom, and they can see I'm wearing hijab, it's sometimes really connect really well. And when they are talking to me, they just refer to know me that, like, as you know, that the cultural norms, what are the cultural norms? So they just expected me to know that, and when they are explaining me how what kind of difficulties they are facing in some situations around their mental health, and what kind of stressors they are having, and there is no hesitation for them to talking about some of their issues, because they can connect in all levels.
Yeah, I also think that there's something about the anchor that it represents. And when you think of the hijab, you think of a faith, right? You think of Islam, and that's what you associate it with. And particularly when you're working with clients that have experienced high degrees of trauma of any kind. One of the things that I always try and ask in one of the first sessions is around what their anchors are. And I think that if you are seen as a Muslim, a visible Muslim wearing hijab, there's, that can be, like you said, Zara, a point of connection with between client and therapist. But yeah, in terms of it standing within mental health and how it helps our mental health and the mental health of our clients, often I find as the work progresses that it really stands as like a physical anchor, as well as the spiritual sense as well. Something that kind of grounds them and brings them back down to their bodies, down to earth, down to the present moment.
Yeah, I also agree with that. I think initially when I started working with clients, I was working with clients who came from very different backgrounds to me, different faiths, different countries. So I think initially seeing myself in a hijab, working with them, I think it's a little bit of having that identity, but then at the same time communicating across that, although we might be different in physically, in what we believe in maybe as well. However, that empathy and that UPR and that that acceptance that comes through with counselling, it doesn't oppose the perhaps what sort of preconceived ideas that they might have. It does oppose, because sometimes it can come with certain notions and it can come with some prejudgments as well. So I think with the hijab, I think it again allows the client to start exploring their own identity and separating between what might be projected and what the reality is.
And I will add on this point, when I'm working in an environment which is multi-ethnicity and the multicultural, and the people who have the faith, even though it might be different from my faith, they certainly know that they definitely connect with that hope, because they just sometimes mention, like, you are a practicing Muslim, I can see that, and that how much the hope is important. And when I'm working with a grief setting, and there is some people who are linked with that, really religious aspects of death and grieving, they definitely connect with that, and how they can easily anchor because of the faith, and then how they can discuss with their religious, connectivity for their own religion, and how they find it, like, as we see that, there is a loss of blaming and anger in the grief, and how does it dispose of to the religious side, like in your faith side. But the people on the other hand who are connected with the religion, they just definitely connect with me as well, because they can discuss how I can connect and how they can connect, and it's easier for them to get onto the point of acceptance.
And for some clients, there's the mirroring aspect when they see that you're wearing the hijab. They find, for some clients I've worked with, a source of comfort in that. And some have expressed the challenges that they do have with that, whether it's microaggressions they're experiencing at work and discrimination. And sometimes it's like, finally, I'm in a space with somebody who is also representing, the veil. And then the flip side of that, I've had clients that who don't wear the hijab, but they still come to sessions, and we have talked about, how do you feel that I'm wearing hijab, and that you're not? So some immediacy to remove the elephant out of the room, to see how they feel about that. And it's like another, again, for some it's a source of comfort to know, although I don't wear it, and Allah knows best what they're feeling inside. Perhaps they're aspiring to get to that stage at some point, but yeah.
I think it's really interesting, because it's one of those things where in this day and age, particularly with young people, I think we underestimate how hard it is to wear a hijab, how hard it is to stand out in a world where you might already feel, conscious of who you are and how you dress, and more so than any other generation, I think, especially with social media. And I think that there's, in the therapy space, it's a space where we want to try and remove all of that judgment from that space. We want that space to be somewhere that's safe, and that we can explore our clients and their world, and of course projections and things like that come into it inevitably, and we're more aware of it. And I think that it's really interesting working with people that aren't Muslim and wearing a hijab, and that being something that is, like you said, an identifying factor, and how that can open the conversation to, what is faith, what is my faith, what is the client's faith, and it's one of the things that I find so really beautiful about it, is that there's always that space for connection. There's always that it comes out somewhere in the work, and I think that's something that's really special when we wear something so visibly, and that is so identifiable, no matter what the political landscape is at the time. So yeah, I think it's even if we were if we were practitioners that didn't practice the hijab, that didn't wear that, we'd come in with our other identifying factors, whether it's someone with tattoos or piercings or whatever it could be. But I think the representation and the weight behind the veil, and the different styles that it's worn, and there's so much that you could tell or assume about someone just from that. So I think it just adds to the work in the therapeutic relationship, and it's just another layer.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, going back to what you said about how you can bring immediacy and open up a whole conversation, because people, different clients will come in with preconceived ideas of what your hijab represents for them. And I think in a sense, hijab and counselling, or even the faith and counselling, it can go hand in hand, where you're not there to judge the client, you're not there to make them feel a certain way or make them feel uncomfortable. And I think as the sessions go, that sort of message comes about when you do practice UPR, you do practice empathy, and then through immediacy and opening up that conversation around how they feel about what the hijab represents for them. I mean, it can be for one client who's it might make them feel comfortable, and then for another client it can make them feel quite uncomfortable. And just, you know, using that, even as I think someone mentioned in the initial session, like, okay, how do you feel? I am wearing a hijab, what's going on for you? When, you know, there is that blatant discomfort there, it then, I think it potentially brings a relationship between, you know, practitioner and client closer. So I think it can be really powerful. And as I mentioned, I feel like the values of faith and the values of a counselor, I think it can go very hand in hand.
Yes. That is really wonderfully described from both of you, Raisa and Humera. And I want to add another side of it. While I'm working like the charities, and whenever there is some of the group settings as well, and some of the time I'm not working with the you know, Muslim clients who can do that. And when I'm working with that, I can imagine that they don't even see I'm wearing hijab. They are so open and expressing their things. So for them, a hijabi counselor, they don't see it. They see a person who is on the other side listening to them. So that's how they connect. And you know, I never till this day have felt there is some kind of discrimination, or somebody tell me that, you know, they don't want to work with me because I'm wearing hijab, or they are not open up to me. Yeah, so that point is that, like, you know, they are not even finding it any kind of restriction onto them. They just take it as normal as any person who is other than me just sitting there in that role. So that is the beauty of counseling, to being a therapist, and the beauty and the confidence which the hijab give me, that, you know, I can practice my boundaries, I can practice my faith, but I can still be helpful.
I also believe it's like exploring the curiosity, if it's there in the room, or if you become attuned with your client. Like I've worked with children, and children, there's less filter, and they're a bit more open with their feelings. And I've had children ask me about what is that? Were you wearing that? And the scarf, and it's absolutely adorable. And so I used sessions with children to explore. Well, this is my identity as a Muslim.
Yeah.
And we work, and they said, oh well, how comes? And so I give them like an analogy, a sweet little analogy of why Muslims as women cover up. And yeah, you can just see the curiosity in their little faces, but it's lovely because it's educating.
Yeah.
And I think that the curiosity is a really important part of therapy and of counselling. And it's interesting, isn't it, how it's almost like the hijab is a metaphor for the counselling or the therapeutic process, because we're unraveling. We're alongside our clients are unraveling alongside us, and they're exploring themselves. I think that it ties into the curiosity that we have alongside our clients, and that kind of, we don't, or at least the way that I practice and that I've been trained to practice is to keep that curiosity alive. I want to know more. I'm not going to assume, and I'm not going to think that I can tell, or it's like when people find out that you're a therapist and they think that you're analyzing them, and I think I'm not, because because the whole point is that I'm curious, and I want to see what's going to come out, and what might open up. And like I truly believe that the person that I'm working with they're the expert on them, and I'm there just to witness and to hold and to hopefully create that safety that they need in order to express themselves. I also think in terms of identity, and that if we think of the hijab, it's given to us to liberate us in, we can do anything with a hijab on, and actually in in this day and age, and maybe for a few years now, there's been a lot of feeling that, you know, can I go into this space wearing a hijab? Can I do this job wearing a hijab? Can I do it being a Muslim? And I think that I always have to remind myself of that, you know, I wear the hijab out of love for my creator, and obedience towards my creator, but also because I know that it's like part of my armor when I go into the world. I can do anything that I want to do as a Muslim, and wearing a hijab, obviously within the realms of what we consider to be halal and all of that. And I think that with clients, I find that there's, especially young people who are at that stage of life where they're figuring out their identities and who they are in the world and how they're perceived and what that means, it can be a really powerful statement of, or perhaps even comfort. I don't know. I can be curious about that in being with someone that does know their identity. So whereas I might not always know who I am in other parts of me, I know that I'm a Muslim and I know that I'll wear a hijab. And again, I think that that can bring up that kind of conversation around who am I? What makes me me? How do people perceive me? And this is the thing that I think is so great about counselling and about therapy, is that it is that space to explore all of that without judgment. So if a client comes in and says, you know, when I first met you, I thought X, Y, and Z about you. Great. I'm so glad that you can say that. That's really important that you're able to express your truth in that way. Yeah, that's my experience anyway. Yeah.
And this raised a really interesting question in my mind, which is like I am a hijabi, which is from the like a childhood. I'm wearing and covering, and if so, that is a part of my personality. I've accepted it. It's not something which I learn and acquire later on. So I know the difference. How does your mindset change? So if someone have an experience who is not hijabi before, as you both Nese and you Raisa working with the children, so people who are not wearing hijab, but the day they start wearing hijab, what kind of difference does it bring into their lives? And what kind of feelings and what kind of security does it bring into their mind? Because for me, when I'm wearing hijab, it gives me a clear guidelines for my boundaries. It tells me and other people, here I am stand, I am this, who I am. With this hijab, there is some limitations which I'm going to follow. There is some boundary lines for you which nobody has to cross. And so that transformation which comes to the people who are new to hijab and the mindset they are having and how they are experiencing it, that would be really interesting to know, that what moves them to start doing hijab. And secondly, we might be the people who are working in a diverse range in this time and age where there's a lots of fields are emerging. As 20 years ago, we don't know about the counseling, it's not that widely spread. And now we are working into it and we are progressing into it. And so people know that, you know, this is such a space where you connect with the people and you can do it wearing hijab.
I agree with that. I think that it's really nice for people. I think it's really important that we are visible because we exist. And I think that's reason enough. We are here. There are lots of Muslim practitioners, those that wear hijab and those that don't. And that's their journey, that's their choice. And I certainly don't think that that's their journey and that's their choice. And I think that it just speaks to the diversity within our own community. And the beauty in Islam, that it's a religion that crosses all cultural bounds. And I think it's really important that we're out there, and I think it's really important that we're seen. And I know at least when I was training, I was looking for Muslim practitioners anywhere. I just need to know that it's possible to do what I'm doing, because it was really difficult. And now that I'm out there, it's really nice to when I speak to young people, particularly young girls, whether they're Muslim or not, but also, of course, the Muslim ones that see me with a hijab, that it's nice. It feels nice to be on the other end of it, and for them to even if it's a bit like, oh wait, it's you, and I think, yeah, it is. It's me. I'm the counsellor or the therapist, and I think that's really nice. It's a really alhamdulillah, nice experience, nice part of the job as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's crucial and essential being seen and visible in our profession and in Muslim communities. When one commits themselves to wearing hijab, I speak from the eye, I'm choosing to become a visual ambassador of Islam. So every single day when I step out of my home, or even if I'm going about like my daily business, walking out in my hijab for me means that I do become a potential target and representation of an entire religion to many non-Muslims, whether I like it or not. And it's important that I remember that I do not represent all Muslims. At the end of the day, each individual person is responsible for their actions. But it's important to role model to others around us that it's okay to observe the hijab, and embrace our identity, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. And this can help with awareness around like false dichotomy with fallacy created between education and hijab. For example, we know there are parts in the world where hijab has been banned. And this, can help clear up any misconceptions that, oh, hey, I've been counseled by somebody who's wearing a hijab, so, they're educated, and that hasn't stopped them from chasing their dreams, both Muslim and non-Muslim.
Yeah.
And, that notion indicates oppression, which Muslim women are liberated from. So wearing hijab is not oppression, but banning the hijab, as we've seen around the world, that is oppression.
Yes.
So what's guaranteed to be a basic human right to practice our religious freedom can be a trap for many Muslim women, But we know in the times of the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, great role models women were in society.
Yeah.
People went to Aisha radiallahu anha for advice, and we are seeing examples of that today. So we are, all praise to Allah, great women that are helping to serve the communities.
Yes.
I agree a lot with what you said, all of what you said. And I think so recently I was watching something and it was a comedian, a lady, she was Muslim, and she wasn't a hijabi, she was a Muslim comedian, and she was on a panel with ladies. It was just predominantly, it was ladies. And I think one of the questions that one of the panelists asked her is that, do you ever ask, because the comedian made it clear that her mum, her family, they wear the burqa. So one of the questions that she posed her, that, do you not ever ask why she wears it? So I think she did make a joke about it, bring out the laughter, but then in the end she said that they wear it because they want to wear it. It's something they want to do. And I think it's so important and it's so valuable that we in this profession are here and we are wearing our hijab, because we chose to wear it, or I chose to wear my hijab. And I think what's really valuable about it is that it's an empowering profession. It's not like, obviously like with other professions, they're still valuable as well. And with this, I think because you're in a space where you're empowering others, it does come with the sense of empowerment in yourself as well. And I think that comes in with the hijab and that being part of your identity. And I think that in itself represents progression rather than oppression. And I think it's a good way of, there are people out there, and I think in the area that I'm in is predominantly white. And, when I do go to the schools or I do work with clients, there are a lot of clients who are outside of the Muslim religion, the Muslim faith, outside of, my culture as well. And I think to have that representation, I think that in itself fights off the preconceived notions that are projected onto the hijab. So I think that's very valuable.
That's true, you know, that the diversity part of our work, when we are wearing hijab and working in a different settings and bringing that in front of people, like we are educated, we are practicing, and we are working in a places where you can't, nobody expect us earlier. Once my supervisor told me, like, you know, having you in our organization is an asset because there is really few people working with us, so we can connect with you, we can ask you the question about the religious point of view, the cultural point of view, the if we are stumbling on somewhere, we know who we can ask, who is one of us. So bringing that diversity in the different settings, and when we work with the people, they know that, you know, that wearing hijab is not something with what is stopping us to connect with them. That's the greatest opportunity we can have to spread our you know, Muslim values.
And I think it's really important, even with our Muslim clients, that we might be an inspiration to them, because I've had some clients said, oh, well, I, you know, wouldn't mind being a counsellor, but they had these insecurities of going into institutions because of being evidently Muslim.
Yeah.
So seeing another Muslim wearing a veil, who's also, you know, who has complete education in becoming, you know, a therapist, it's given them kind of hope and inspiration. And, you know, that's what we need in life. We need motivation, inspiration, you know, to all reach our fullest potential. And I've worked with many clients that have so much potential, but they've had all these, you know, insecurities and whole, you know, setbacks and things that have been holding them down. Yeah. So on one hand, society claims to be the torchbearers of women's rights, right, and choices. However, when it comes to Muslim women choosing to practice their religion, the standards sometimes seem to differ.
Yeah.
But although it's compulsory to observe the hijab, and we know it's an act of worship, our creator, but it demonstrates submission, but at the end of the day, it is my choice, as you've mentioned as well. It's a choice.
It is true.
So it's liberating. That's liberating.
Yeah.
And the point is that if we come out, that the day we come out today and we tell people, like, you know, there are people like us who are working, we have to bring that forward. We have to be visible and more visible. So that's how we can pave the way for others. So people who are being hesitant, like, I can't do anything because I'm practicing, that's not the thing. There are places, there are choices, and there are things you can still do.
Yeah, and I think another thing that reminds me of is when it comes to Islam and it comes to religion, I think there are sometimes preconceived notions, or there's a bit of confusion around where mental health stands when it comes to faith. And I think to see that there are Muslim hijabi counselors out there, or there are Muslim therapists and practitioners out there, it brings that hope that, you know, it's okay to have, you know, depression, it's okay to have anxiety. It's not something which will be dismissed, and it is something that you can bring forward, and it's something that faith does acknowledge, rather than putting it down to other, you know, other reasons. So I think that in itself is quite valuable as well, and having that representation.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Humera, and I think that there's I completely agree with you, and I think this idea that having some sort of therapy is counterintuitive to Islam or to any religion it's really prominent in a lot of faith-based communities, and I think us as Muslim women being being visible within our field is invaluable to counteracting that message, because it feels like it's a very old age interpretation, but unfortunately it's not. It's still very alive and it's still very there. And I think that might be where sometimes, you know, just meeting people and explaining your job and what you do in your career and how you practice, there can be that kind of, but I thought we're not, are you sure? Like, is that okay? And I think that there's a really beautiful point there as well, in that actually, yeah, it is okay. And, you know, having a strong faith and believing in your faith, whatever that may be, and for us, Islam, it doesn't mean that you're never going to be depressed. It doesn't mean that, you know, you're never going to experience anxiety because your faith is so strong. And I actually think that message in and of itself can be quite damaging, because of the fact that there are so many people that read all of their prayers on time and read their Quran and are, you know, mashallah, so practicing, and they're still suffering. So once you get to that point, it's like, you know, that as always, it turns inward. Like, why aren't I good enough? Why doesn't Allah love me? Why? Maybe it's me. Maybe there's something wrong, inherently wrong with me. And to have someone that shares your faith to say, actually, that's not the case. There's something else going on here. Let's sit together and let's think about it. There's a real comfort in that, I think, or I'd hope. And even working with people that aren't Muslim and believe in a different faith, to you know, you can still think about the parts of having a faith and believing in God and believing in a creator. And yeah, and I think that's up to all of us in our individual ways of practicing to kind of put that across. I also think that there's something of acknowledging the fact that we're Muslim within the therapy space with our clients, but also acknowledging the fact that we might practice our religions differently, and that can be, you know, there's so many different facets of Islam as well, and I think there's an important point in, you know, acknowledging the fact that we share the faith. We might practice it differently, and that's all welcome in this space. You know, that's okay. It's kind of like acknowledging those silent barriers that come up in the space, and when they come up naturally, and kind of hoping to bring them down, so that connection can happen and the work can begin.
I agree with Raisa with the points you've made, and a lot of it I find is with attunement with my client. Once I feel like we're in tune, I then work through incongruence. If there's an incongruence, you know, we do explore that, and it's in the open. It's again reaching that space where there's trust, or they feel safe enough to open up. You know, like one day you may feel, oh gosh, it's an effort to put my hijab on. And we speak about this in the sessions. You know, you have a bad hair day, bad hijab day, you know. So bringing these conversations to light, I find it's really helpful, because sometimes someone needs to hear sometimes what they're feeling, but they're holding back to say, you know. So there's a little bit of disclosure, perhaps self-disclosure. When it feels safe enough to do so. You know, it's okay to have a bad hijab day, and sometimes you might not feel like wearing it. That's okay, you know. And reassuring clients that we're all on a journey. We're all on a journey. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only judge. You know, and you know, I find that is really quite powerful in our sessions. Kind of frees and breaks down shackles or feeling judged. Because unfortunately, a lot of clients come from backgrounds where they're being judged. They're in households that they're being judged. Some don't know why they have to wear the hijab, or why they wear the hijab. It's educating. When I studied in an institution, there were examples where people and colleagues thought that you go to bed with a hijab, you shower with a hijab. So it was, you know, having light-hearted discussions, and actually no, we do take this off. It's our vow. We don't go to bed with it, we don't shower with it, but it's education, because some people, you know, they don't know. They think that it's attached to us 24 hours. So it's having these conversations and educating other people. You know, why we wear hijab, and, you know, so I don't know if you ladies have experienced any similar conversations.
In regards to judgment, I remember I had a client quite recently actually, and I remember her being really worried about me judging her, and she was just like, "Please don't judge me," and it came with quite a bit of emotion there. And then, and as you said, it's like a way of opening up the conversation and seeing what's really going on there. Where is this fear of judgment coming from? Is it because, you know, sometimes there's a bit of a mixture between culture and religion, and, you know, at times people who look, you know, who have a hijab, or, you know, they might have experienced certain judgments from, and then that's sort of projected onto now people who might be wearing a hijab, and there's that fear of, okay, I can't open up because I might be judged. But then there's that conflict, because going to someone who doesn't perhaps share this, not for everyone, but for some clients, they still want that. They still want someone who, you know, wears a hijab or perhaps is of the same faith, just so that they're not having to explain everything, and they still have that common ground, and, you know, there's that mutual understanding. So I think in regards to the judgment part, I've experienced that. A lot of emotion and worry there of being judged.
Yeah, I think that goes back to whatever our clients walk in with and their experiences, and again, why it's so important to be so curious about it. But yeah, the fear of judgment from a practitioner anyway is huge, right? When you step into the space for the first time, you know, and so I get it in terms of being a hijab, and maybe I remind them of a really judgmental hijabi auntie that they had, or maybe, you know, there's, you know, who knows. But I think that also goes, you know, it's wider than just the hijab, but there is, you know, we can't ignore the fact that that's sometimes the elephant in the room, and also media interpretations, and also there's so much there, right? So although it's a hijab and it's a cloth and it's a veil, it can often be quite loaded, and it's sometimes way more than others, depending on what's happening in the world, and at the same time a source of great comfort as well, depending on who we're working with, which I just think is just the beauty of our work, that we get to meet so many different people from so many different walks of life and have this kind of connection with them.
Yeah. And that's all discussion does bring in my mind that, you know, as a therapist, as a counselor, we are facilitators. So we facilitate that, you know, we are there. We, by doing this talk, we are telling them we are hijabis, we are there, and mental health is a real issue, and you can come for help. There are people who can connect with you, who might be the similar background, similar faith, and similar values like you have, and you are able to connect with them and talk about your issues.
Yeah, there was something else as well in terms of people that have experienced some sort of intervention, some sort of mental health intervention in the past, and not felt connected and felt very judged because of their faith, because they were Muslim, or because they wore a hijab themselves as a client. And I find it a real honor on, you know, in the moments where I meet clients or meet people in passing, that are just really happy to see a Muslim woman being a therapist, because it means that there's somewhere that I could go, and there's potentially more. And I think just even sharing the link, I can't count how many times I've shared the link to MCAPN. Like I can't count it, because it's like there's a whole list of Muslim practitioners that you can go to, and you can look at their profiles, and you can check it out, and you can speak to them. And I think, you know, people need to know that it's out here and that we're out here, and we've been out here, and inshallah we'll grow and grow, and there'll be lots of different types of counselors, lots of different types of therapists, just to add to the mix of things. And I think that it's really nice, actually, because my hope is that the future beyond my life, that it will be as mixed as the Muslim community is. So, you know, like there's a kind of therapy, there's a kind of counselling, there's a kind of intervention for every different kind of person, and hopefully we can see ourselves and our faith within that as well. I think that would be really nice.